New year means reset, sleep, energy, workouts, stress levels, all of it. That is why I decided to try Ultra Pouches. No nicotine, no caffeine, but packed with nootropics, designed for mental clarity and focus. You get the same kick as a nicotine pouch, but without the jitters, without the buzz, without the crash, without the addiction, and without your body living in a constant state of stress. Most pouches jack up cortisol and blood pressure. Ultra does not. My biggest New Year's goal was better sleep, and that is where I noticed the difference first. Falling asleep is easier, and when I wake up, I'm actually rested. Here's the deal. Ultra is the ultimate guilt-free pouch. New customers can use the code Chael at takeultra.com. That's going to get you 15% off. That's takeultra.com. You're going to get 15% by using the code Chael. And when they ask where you heard about them, support the show. Tell them I sent you. I wish there was a nice way to say this, but Jon Jones is worth what his contract calls for. Right? Jon Jones does not have a worth. Jon Jones has a contract. And I have to bring this up. There's a little bit of an old guard, and I'm attempting just to explain this to you, because there appears to be a narrative by our own community that there is like an impropriety going on. And there is an old guard. Okay? Now, I want to disclose something right to you up front. This is a Jon Jones defense piece. I am on Jon Jones' side of this in that I understand Jon Jones, because I would also represent the old guard. I would also understand how it was done in the Zuffa days where you started. And it's just a very different business now. I mean, we don't even use the term pay-per-view anymore. And by the way, guys, this whole numbered events thing, we're 63 days in. We don't quite have, right, we're trying to grasp this, and we get it, and we hear certain numbers, and it's public, and you look like, I'm just sharing with you, like, we're just getting started, but I just want to talk mindset. Because Jon Jones is not wrong, but he's misunderstanding something. From Jump Street, okay, the UFC got very generous with money. They would have contracts with guys, and then certain fights would come up, and they would just understand, like, hey, this is being used in a main event. This is a big one that the crowd wants to see, or this is a hard or dangerous one, or hey, this is a short notice fight, and you're helping us out. And just by proxy of that, the UFC began a policy, which became a tradition, which became the way things were expected to be, was to then pay somebody above and outside of that contract. And that never needed to happen all the way back to pay-per-view points. Pay-per-view points became a standard of our industry for defending champions and huge draws, Brock Lesnar, by example. It became a standard of the industry, but think about what you're doing. You're giving away a piece of the business. With how to buy in, right? Like if you want to buy into a business, you've got to write a check. Every shareholder has to write a check. The UFC is going to give it to you as an incentive, but also as an attempt, like boxing was doing it, and the UFC was kind of really in line with keeping up with boxing and making sure that there was some parallels. And this generosity got away. It really did. And now you've got top guys that have contracts, but they want to have a discussion. I just want to make sure you, the audience, understands this. Like, what you are worth is what your contract calls for, and nothing else. And then it comes down to, do you want to fight? Now, there's a generosity around that. And so Jon's not wrong. Like, this has been the way that Jon has done business. And so he's not wrong to just think that that's going to continue. But I just want to share, like, there's not a debate. And some of Jon's numbers do get very strange. I was at the post-fight press conference after Jon fought Stipe, which I argue for you is the nastiest and most vicious Jon Jones we have ever seen. I do not know what got into him that night. But boy, you would not have wanted to be locked in that cage with him, at any rate. He goes to the post-fight press conference, and they're talking about him and Tom. And this is just a very obvious one. Like, it had already been announced, hey, Tom's taking on the winner, and Tom's sitting in the front row, and Tom's the interim champion. It was a little weird that Tom wasn't in there with him, but hey, we're going to make this right. Whoever comes out of this, Stipe or Jon's going to face Tom. So Jon goes to the post-fight press conference, And he calls for $40 million. And where did he get that number? Well, I'll tell you. There was a fight the night before. It was Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, and they released to the media, inaccurately as hell, but they released to the media that one of them was paid, I think it was Jake Paul, was paid $40 million. So this number was just in Jon's head. So he just throws the number out. And I bring that to you because he's now revealing that when he wanted to fight on the White House card, he wanted $15 million. He wanted $15 million, but his reason for wanting that is because Conor Benn got $15 million. Like, okay, I see the human nature in this, but this is very strange. You have a contract. Now, in Jon's defense, okay, he has pay-per-view points within his contract that he expects. Per the contract, if he doesn't fight on pay-per-view, those points just don't exist. Now, this actually happened with a teammate of mine, Dan Henderson, who was a very big draw, and he was pay-per-view points. And they went over to Fox Sports. Dan was going to fight Vitor Belfort in the main event. So Dan just called Lorenzo and goes, hey, how are we doing this? Because it's not on pay-per-view. And Lorenzo goes, well, let's just take your last 3 pay-per-views and let's just average it and go with that. That's how they solved the problem. That made perfect sense. Everybody agreed, and that's what they did. Jon's in a little bit of a different spot where he's saying, hey, you're not doing pay-per-view, so I want a guarantee. And the guarantee is being resisted by the UFC, but here's just something that I want you to understand. Like, if you were doing this, if you were to put yourself in someone else's shoes, but I need you to understand this when we're talking about policy-wise. Let's say the UFC came to a deal with Jon Jones for $15 million, just by example. Now, Jon Jones doesn't have a lot of guys to fight. Jon Jones is so good and so elite. As a matter of fact, to be literal, 17 days ago, he had nobody to fight. 17 days ago, 2 Fridays ago, Alex Pereira relinquished the light heavyweight belt and became a heavyweight. That is the moment that Jon Jones now has an opponent. But I want you to understand how the UFC works. If the UFC tells Judge, so you're not paying Jon Jones $15 million to fight, you would have no way to justify that. You would have no revenue that's going to change, that's going to up, that could justify that. You would just be giving him the money? Okay. But I want you to understand policy-wise, if the UFC agreed to give him the money, and Alex Pereira then pulled out, you see where that's a wildly different fight. Who are you going to put in? You can't go to Surreal, the next best guy. You can't go to Surreal. You can't go to Francis. You can't go to Aspinall. Who are you going to put in? So now you're bringing in Volkov. And no disrespect to Volkov. I'm just sharing, like, that isn't, you see where that isn't a $15 million fighter. You go to Derek Lewis or you go to Tai Tuivasa. I'm trying to think of some of these heavyweights that are ranked. You see where that's not. But the UFC, if they told Jon, we will pay you $15 million to fight on this date, if their side of it fell through, meaning Pereira fell through, the whole reason you're paying Jon fell through, the UFC will honor the $15 million. And you see where that becomes a little bit problematic. You see where it's like, hey, we've got to hold the event. So we've got a contract. Here's what we need to pay you. We're going to agree to pay you grossly more than that. Now, you want exponentially even more than that. We can have that conversation, but it has to be after the fact. We have to see how this whole thing plays out. And I'm just sharing that with you, like, one of the biggest aggravations that you could ever have as a promoter is having 746 guys under contract, and 746 guys want to re-talk about their contract every single time they fight. I remember Francis came out and said this. He goes, each time I fight, let's just sit on top, let's go to lunch. And I remember when him saying that, I'm going, are you out of your mind? How many lunches do you want him to have? Why are we possibly talking about a conversation that we've already talked about? I remember when Francis said that. Like, if anything Francis said, that was the one thing that stood out. Like, Francis, you think they're going to sit down and renegotiate what's already done? It was just a very weird stance. And Jon has come out and he said, and this was very reasonable by Jon, but you must understand, when you start to want to talk about talking and you want to start meeting about meeting, you don't get more talking and you don't get more meetings. You actually lose your line of communication and you get pushed onto somebody else. And this game takes me back to kindergarten. We called it telephone, where we sat in a circle and somebody whispered something in your ear, then you whisper it in the next person's ear, and you whisper, and then the last person repeats it, and it's nothing close to what the first person said. But now you're playing a game of telephone. So Jon has one opinion, and Jon is being very honest and very forthright. I very much believe what he's saying, but he didn't talk to anybody. He got this from a manager who talked to somebody who, by the way, wasn't the guy. The manager did not speak to Dana White. So now you have Dana speaking to somebody who spoke to a manager who related to Jon, who related to the media, who told it to us. I mean, it's a game of telephone. And this is where those relationships become so important. And meanwhile, you get a guy like Sean O'Malley, second biggest draw in the sport, if not the biggest draw. Like there's real arguments with him and Pereira's numbers. And he says yes. His phone rings, he says yes. He came out and did an interview, said, we haven't actually talked about money yet. There's 14 weeks, I imagine we will at some point, but he was just an honest guy. He was a straight up guy. And by the way, he directly speaks to the guy. He doesn't have to play a game of telephone because of the relationship, because of the way that he does business, because of his willingness. It's two different approaches. But Jon came out, and I want you to hear something, because this was powerful. It was a very powerful statement by Jon. And Jon simply said, if you really think that I'm done, you heard about my hip and I got a bad attitude, if you really think I'm done, release me. That's very hard to argue against. It's very hard. And it's an interesting spot. Jon is not going to like the free market. There is nowhere to go. It's not that there's nowhere to go, but once you're now not with the UFC, it's a tremendous spot. And you could be given money. Like Francis has gotten money. I've heard Francis come out and say, I made. No, you didn't. Make is where you generate a profit and you get a piece of it. You were given, somebody lost their ass. You were given money. That was charity. It's a good deal if you can get it. I'm just sharing with you, the guys that do play that game and the guys that do leave do end up having a different appreciation. My good friend Nate Diaz, but he was very open about that. You know, he left the UFC and he said, God, I look back and they just did so many things so well that I took for granted. You know, he's very complimentary. And I want Jon to be able to what he wants to do. And Jon makes a very strong case when he says, hey, if you really think I'm done, and by the way, they're not ranking him, by the way, they're not using him, if you really think that, but it's kind of a two-way street of, hey, Jon, you've got the right to feel that you're owed something, but please understand, so do we. You went through multiple test failures. You went through multiple legal cases. You gave a belt back and sat for 3 years. You refused to fight Tom Aspinall. Like, this has not been easy for us. And by the way, you're awesome. You're really awesome. We just don't have a lot of guys for you to fight. So when these things can come together, such as having somebody like Alex Pereira relinquish a belt, move up and say yes, you got to take those opportunities, or those opportunities pass you by.